One. All right, I'm back. So Surreal, this is probably going to be part 2, right? Of our, because we did one session a couple, maybe a month or 2 ago. By the way, that was one of my most popular sessions. So thank you for that one. Yeah. So people who haven't seen that one, they should probably go and check that one out. But Surreal, nice to have you back. How's your day?
It's been pretty good. Yesterday, the whole day, I was just excited about the Coinbase IPOing, and I was glued on my computer and my phone, just waiting for the opening price of Coinbase. And when I saw it was almost $380, I was like, wow, that's something. And I was really excited to see it. And it got me, all my antennas were like on full radar, and now I've mellowed down, but it was quite fascinating to see that something that was just a piece of white paper and code about 13 years ago is now more valuable than Goldman Sachs. So, which is which
Wild.
is which is wild. And the fastest trillion that has ever been created happened in Bitcoins. We are in really exciting times, and there'll always be naysayers, people saying that, oh, Bitcoin won't last, but that's because they've missed the boat, or they're just not confident about it. And they think that Bitcoin is just a fad, and just like people were thinking that internet is a fad, and look what happened. So pretty good mood, like pretty excited, pretty trying to think what can I do in the Bitcoin community now, like to do something new, something challenging within the framework and my limitations. Yeah.
The bottom of your face is being cut off. Can you lower the camera or something? Yeah, there you go. That's a lot better. Yeah, that's
Better?
or now a little bit higher. Yeah, that's good. That's perfect. Yeah, dude. No, I agree with you. As you may or may not know, Coinbase is obviously near and dear to our heart as well, in the sense that in back in 2012, it was a conversation with David Johnston where he had asked me on a Skype call back when Skype was something that people used. He asked me, what's going on with India? Is there something like a Coinbase? Is there something where people can easily buy and sell Bitcoin? And the truthful answer was there was no platform, there was no wallet or KYC and integration with banking and this and that. None of that was done. And so the genesis of the business we started back in December 2013 was also inspired by Brian. So it's amazing to see their journey, and now how, I don't know, what did they hit, like $100 billion? I think they saw the article market cap, and then they dropped. No, I don't know, but just to be able to say that, I think is pretty. So yeah, hats off to him. So I guess today, what was our goal? One of our goals was to spend a bit of time in terms of like maybe sharing the India story in terms of, and by the way, I'm just going to pause here real quick. So our goal was to essentially just tell the story of our version of it, at least in terms of how we saw the India and the Bitcoin scene in India progress since 2012. It's probably an appropriate time given the Coinbase announcement, the Tesla news. Every day it seems like new news comes out, but why not? And before we told the story of India and Bitcoin, I guess we thought maybe it's relevant to tell our own stories a bit, so there's a bit more context. So why don't you start? why don't you share where are you from? And then if you want, we can ping pong back if your mouth gets too dry or you get bored.
Okay. So I'm from India, Bombay, Mumbai, and I spent most of my life in this city, except for 6 years when I was in California, in Silicon Valley for 6 years. I was doing my undergrad at that point. And then in 2006, I came back to India and I started my law school here. And at that point, I started researching on privatization of space exploration. At that point, everyone was talking about how there's going to be a race to outer space, and how NASA and all are going to hire private companies to build their shuttles and do their launches and stuff like that. And I was pretty fascinated by that area because there are so many legal challenges. Imagine that there's discussion of renegotiating the Moon Treaty, which hasn't been done since the 60s, I think, or the 50s, whenever it was signed. And then while I was researching, one of my colleagues, he comes up to me and says, "Oh, you're looking at this. Why don't you look at Bitcoins?" And I was like, "Bitcoins? What is that?" And he was like, "Just research it. Just look it up. It's there on Google and everything." And this was sometime in 2012. And the minute I read about it, I was like, wow. Obviously, when I read the Bitcoin paper, I couldn't understand one word of it because it was a bit too technical for I could understand bits and pieces, but majority of it was just too technical for me to even attempt to understand because, the hash rate and things like that was just complete forget rocket science. It was just complete Greek and Latin for me. And so then I started just browsing the net and started reading articles about Bitcoin. And at that point, everything that I found led me to the dark web and all those issues. But then I was more interested in the philosophical side of Bitcoin rather than just the technical side, because technically it's a pretty powerful tool. And I was interested in knowing more about why would something like this what's the purpose behind it? At the same time, I had been following the Occupy Wall Street protests, and I'd been following all those things, and I'd been following all this counterculture stuff about, at that time, I think Julian Assange had just emerged onto the scene, and WikiLeaks and Wikipedia was growing and things like that. And then when I read that it is what's that word I'm looking for? It's censorship-free money, and then that's what got my attention. I'm like, what do you mean by censorship-free money? Is our money censored? And then I started thinking about in ways money is censored, and I was like, oh yeah, that's the reason why it's getting accumulated in just certain pockets and it's not spreading the way it's supposed to. And that got me really excited about Bitcoins. And then when I was looking for conferences, I chanced upon the conference that you guys were hosting in 2013, the Global Bitcoin Conference. And I was like, I should go for it. And so I convinced my office and my team in my office that, we really need to look at this as an area of practice because it's the future of money. And there were obviously fortunately, I didn't face as much resistance as one would expect because my father being the founder of the law firm, and he was like, okay, look into it, but look into it. And then I decided that I would go for the conference, and that's where I met you and Tavik and Harish and Benson and pretty much the Bitcoin early pioneers. And it was even at the conference more than because the conference had mostly a lot of technical stuff that was being talked about. All the presenters presented great stuff, but I couldn't understand it because mathematics and computer science is totally out of my league. But I managed to understand that this thing is something very powerful. And I came back, I met you, and then we had the discussion on our way to the airport when we shared the cab ride to the airport. And I convinced you to come to my office because we had already started some research and we were quasi aware of the issues. And then when you came with the CFO, I'm thinking, of Butterfly Labs, you and him, and I don't know if was that for the first meeting. I don't think so.
I was with a company called Buttercoin out of San Francisco, and then there was a company at the time called Butterfly Labs as well that was doing Bitcoin mining. I think they ended up being not so great company, but man, it brings back memories. No, I was gonna say that, and that meeting is important, right? It sounds like it was just like a meeting, but I think that was an important meeting, at least from my view, because of, I guess, the story that unfolds after that. But I think if you and I hadn't connected, I think the story would have been different, and who knows, for the better or worse. But I think it definitely made a difference. Should I do a quick background? I've shared my story on a lot of other platforms,
Uh,
but I think,
no,
yeah.
it's up to you. If you think it's relevant, then you can do it. If you feel that you've done it already.
Like I can do mine in a few seconds in the sense that obviously I've done longer versions of it, but mine is look, my parents are from India, born and raised in Canada. I studied electrical engineering. I spent the first half of my life in Alberta and the last half in Toronto in the eastern part of Canada. So minus maybe about 5 years when I lived in India. And plus India, we visited, like I said, almost every year growing up. And after I graduated, I just had some engineering jobs. Just felt super confused by money because no one ever taught me anything about it, and I became a financial advisor. Through that journey, became more confused about money than even at the beginning of it, because I was just like, I thought I understood things better, but in reality I didn't, because I couldn't answer simple questions like what is money or what is inflation or things like that. And when people would ask me, I would just hum and ho, and I just didn't feel like it was the right path. I left. I spent 8 years in robotics, selling robots around the world to Stanford, Georgia Tech, IIT, MIT, NIT, you name it. Every university I've been in their lab. And then finally in 2010, 2011, I think it was, I moved out to India on behalf of that robotics company and was living out there, got bit by the Bitcoin bug, read the white paper. And it was because of my, I think, questioning of money / technical, like engineering background that I think enabled me to go deep enough to build a lot of conviction early on to be like, oh my God, this is money. This is money. This is how money should be built. And so I just almost went into 6 months of hibernation, no food, no sleep, the thing that happens to a lot of Bitcoiners early. And then when I awakened from that slumber of just boring my grandmother. I had my grandmother living with me at the time, boring her every day with Bitcoin news, Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that. I was watching what Anthony Diorio and these guys were doing in Toronto with the Bitcoin meetups and everything. And I felt like I was missing out. And so that spurred me to start. I was living in Bangalore at the time. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends, but I just knew one thing. I'm like, if I'm going to make friends in India, it's not going to be to talk about cricket. And cricket's great, but it's not my thing. I'm like, it's going to be to talk about Bitcoin. So I started doing meetups, meetup.com. Benson, I think we're going to be interviewing him soon as well, but he was one of the first people I met. There's another gentleman named Amitabh, who's a PhD. He taught me a lot back in the day. I remember late nights drinking, just whiteboard, like formulas. It's just, I don't even get this. What is this public key, private key, cryptography? Okay, sit down. It was fun, man. It was crazy. And then those meetups became like, they were just coffee shop hangouts, 5 people, 10 people. But the one thing we were committed is like, no matter what, we're just going to keep meeting. Even if one person shows up or nobody shows up or 1,000 people show up, we're just going to keep meeting, just because we wanted to be around other people that were interested in Bitcoin. That eventually, I said 30 seconds, or maybe not 30 seconds, 5 minutes. I could do nothing in 30 seconds. But then I met Satvik and Harish, maybe 6 months, a year into that journey. And that was like a big catalyst, because I'm an engineer, but I'm not the greatest engineer. I'm more of a BD guy, I would say. And so I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of connections. But I'm not the best programmer. But Satvik, on the other hand, when he showed up at I'll never forget the day he showed up. It was like at the Hard Rock Cafe. He looked like an Entourage. Have you seen the show Entourage on Netflix or I forget what it was on, but Entourage, it was literally like Entourage, and the doors swing open, like 4 guys behind him. He's got his like wife, and he's dressed like in gold and this and that. And he's like, okay, this guy's different. But the thing I really liked about Satvik is that, like, whenever we'd have ideas, he wouldn't just be like talking about it. He would just go do it. He'd be like, okay, this mining thing sounds interesting. Let's start an operation. Okay, we had the facility. We have had some guy flying to New York. We bought the miners. Boom. Okay. Oh, we lost money 3 months later, 6 months later. I lost a lot of money. Okay, let's try the next one. Physical Bitcoins. Okay, they want to do a conference? I'm thinking about it, talking about it, humming, hoeing. Satvik's like, done. Hotel booked. Let's go. And it wasn't just Satvik as well. It was just the community. A lot of people stood up and started helping out. And so, yeah, so coming to that event, just these meetups went from coffee shops to Leela Palace to eventually being like, we need to do something larger and grander. And so the Global Bitcoin Conference was just, a culmination of that. And building up to that as well, I had this domain called Unocoin for like almost a year or two. That was really just a simple website. What we're building for Braving Bitcoin, it was just like just some information, nothing too intense. But after I met, we started thinking about, after my conversation with David Johnson about Coinbase and just thinking through the problems, that it was like, wait, like India needs something that's built for India. And that was our key insight. At the time, there was one other platform. I wouldn't call it a platform. It was more just like a one-page website where I think it's called Buy Sell Bitcoin, where you could just go and no KYC, no wallet, nothing. Just, it was a nice service, actually. You just go deposit cash at a bank, and before you're home in your auto rickshaw, you've got your Bitcoin in your wallet type of deal. So it's like, but it was very clean, very simple. We thought there's more room here for integration with like payment processors, banking, and doing things at a bigger scale. So that was the genesis of our idea. And so when I met you that day, I was still working. I think I had taken a job with Buttercoin. So I was working for Buttercoin, and Unocoin, Satvik at the time had taken the reins and was building it. Yeah. So it was an interesting time, man. I remember meeting you because when we started, I was living in Bombay at the time. So after we finished the conference in Bangalore, you and I were essentially flying back together, and then in the car ride back, we were just like talking nonstop. And do you remember the thing that you said to me? I was like, because like, I'm not gonna lie, as an engineer, as an entrepreneur, it's like really difficult to like like the legal side of the world, like the way you describe the white paper and the math and the computer science is how I think tech people see the legal side of things. It's like a black box. What on earth is going on? So when I met you, and I was just like, and you started telling me about who you were and what you were doing and your interest in Bitcoin and who your dad and what he's done and everything, it was just like, it was really refreshing because it started to feel like, wait, this conference and everything, it was maybe for this, at least for me, it was so I can meet this guy. Because without this other half of the equation, you can't really build a business. And so I'm really grateful for that. But anyway, so maybe I'll paraphrase, but I remember you told me something. You said it's important, like as innovators, you never want to break the law, because I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people in Bitcoin and just in crypto make, is they just blatantly go out there and they do whatever. But I think if you're going to build a business in this space, you have to put on your big boy pants and you have to understand what the laws are, number one, so that you don't break them. And that's where hiring good lawyers and being friends with them or whatever, connecting with them somehow is vital to any sort of, I think, success, at least my view. I don't know, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think in that moment, I probably said something like, don't break the law, bend the law. And what I also believe is that lawyers are probably one of the communities that are best geared to survive anarchy, because if you
Tell me why.
Because they're able to look at law, in law we have something called legal fiction, where you create stories and hypothetical situations and things like that, and you see which law. If there is no law, how do you need a certain kind of a mind to navigate through it, right? And lawyers have that because of the work-based. End of the day, law is nothing but philosophy, right? It's all based on philosophical concepts, and your philosophy is what determines your acceptance or rejection of the law. If your philosophical equations are right, then law becomes quite a no-brainer, right? And the most important thing is that principle is that harm no one. That's a common principle, and that gets extended into various laws, and it's based on the simple principle that it shouldn't harm anyone, but in case harm is done, then what? That's what law in a small kind of explanation is. And crime and punishment becomes a very interesting area of law also, right? The first question that I asked when I was in law school was that, what does the Constitution have over me? Why am I being forced into this system? It's just a geographical lottery that I've won or lost, whatever perspective you take on that. And why is it So I had those kind of questions in my mind for the longest time. And when internet came along, I was living it. And then I realized that if the world on the internet is seamless, where there's no real boundaries on the internet, right? If you're on Facebook or if you're on Google, it doesn't have, you don't need a passport to go to another website, or you don't need immigration to go into the website of another country. And then I was like, why do you need all this in the physical world? Why is there this divide? Or, it's so crazy, right? That on the one hand, we are doing all this global e-commerce, and we are going, and coming back to the point that looking at every country and looking at every society, lawyers somehow are able to make their way, especially when it comes to if a cop arrests you, say I'm a lawyer, and changes the whole conversation. And for me,
I always used to just say my brother's a lawyer. My brother from another mother. No, I'm kidding. But no, I agree. But that's such an interesting statement, though, the lawyers. But because you understand the law. So you said law is nothing more than philosophy. But if you had to define it, what is law? Like, what is the definition of law? Is there a definition of law?
There are many definitions of law.
Yeah.
But I don't have it on top of my mind, even though I should be. But law is just like a framework of rules and regulations that are designed to keep the society functional. It's, to speak in a very loose way, it's both a tool and a weapon. Like, you can use law to just bring down somebody. You can just scare them with the law, or you can use certain laws and get a certain section of the society ahead, pull them up and bring them to a certain level in society or a standing in society. So law has a lot of, it's words. You play with words. It's a whole bunch of words and a whole bunch of psychology and sociology and all of that combined. And economics is this really strange animal between science and law, right? It's this animal that we've created, right? Just like we've created laws, just like we've created mathematics. But it's the one pillar of society on which everything is dependent. Like, everyone wants to talk about money, everyone wants to, and the whole dynamic, we are like growing up, you're told that money is scarce and there's always a shortage of money for some reason or the other. And then when you grow up and then you suddenly notice that there's shortage, but then there are companies, there are individuals with just billions of dollars out there. And on the one side, so the mindset is of scarcity, right? We are brought up in that. And then if you flip it and you say, what if everything is abundant? How does that change the perspective on society? How does that, and the principle of scarcity plays an important role in one aspect, but also we forget about the principle of abundance also, right? Like, oxygen is abundant, and you only realize that its importance when you have asthma or you have something like that, when like right now we have shortages of oxygen cylinders in India because in the COVID. And it's a very like economics, law, science, politics, all of those things that are so ingrained in our minds. And like, I think I lost my chain of thought.
Yeah, it's okay. No, I picking up what you're putting down. But okay, but I guess maybe let's go back to our story. So in terms of after you and I met, we actually connected with your father, yourself. You had a bunch of, I don't want to go too much into it because we did interview your father as well. But okay, I'll just do my kind of elevator pitch here from what I know. From what I understand, you guys have built, in my eyes, probably the top techno legal firm in the country like bar none type of deal. In my view, from what I had heard, and I could be wrong, correct me, is that all the top kind of companies in the world that operate out of India work with your firm at one point or another. Things like, I think, foreign investments that happen through Mauritius, I think that kind of research and R&D was all uncovered by your dad's firm and your guys's, and fundamentally it's like a firm full of, I know they're probably not all engineers, but it seems like there's a lot of like people who are engineers that become lawyers that work for your organization, and like 100 other things. So it seems like it's not just like your run-of-the-mill corner like a legal guy doing paperwork for what's it called, the notaries or whatever or something like that. It's like you guys are you're out to change the world, if that might, I don't know, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but it seems like you're at the forefront of whether it's space, Bitcoin, and payment processing, et cetera, and trying to push the border there. And Bitcoin, I was a bit surprised when we got invited into your office that it seemed like yourself, your father, you guys had this like already, like you were, maybe because you guys had done a lot of analysis already in the matter, but it seemed like you guys were very well educated in terms of like where Bitcoin stood with respect to the law. And that was, like I said, almost unheard of, especially back in that time. We would be doing meetups all the time in Bangalore. Nobody had a clue what this thing was. We walk into your office and it was like, you guys are lawyers and you're telling us like stuff that we don't even know about Bitcoin. Like, this is awesome. And that was a magical moment, right? Why? Because of what maybe preceded what happened soon after that. I've shared this story, but at that event, not only did I meet you, we also had the good fortune of having other people like regulators also show up at these events. And we actually had people from the RBI show up saying to us like, look, we don't want to be called out in front of everyone. Don't say and make a big fuss, but we're here to watch. And almost a week after that, a week into our business launching, we had a notice that went up on the RBI's website. I don't know if you remember this, but you probably do. There's and I'm paraphrasing a bit, but it was essentially a notice on the central bank in India, their website, saying that, look, these things like Bitcoin are super risky, namely volatility. We have concerns around security. The common person should stay away from this because of that. And that, did I paraphrase it correctly, or is there some maybe points missing there? Yeah. And what that did to people like entrepreneurs who are really like that, we're just doing this because it's fun, it's exciting, we want to change the world, but we're not trying to like hurt anyone here. We were just excited about this technology. We had it threw a cloud over the industry. Again, I won't go into details, but people can Google it. But one of the other companies at the time, they were, I think, raided by the ED or something like that. The Enforcement Directorate, which is like the equivalent of the anti-money laundering department or something like that. I know Unocoin, our day 4 or day 5, we had 30 people from the tax department show up at our front door, and that was obviously very stressful. And after the event, after Bombay, after our meeting with you guys, I had actually flown to Colombia, and I was visiting my wife's family there, and all this stuff was like coming up in Twitter, and I was just like, oh my God, like the event was amazing. What is happening now? Why us, right? I was like, something, we just started this business. Let's just close shop. We don't need to do this. This is just for fun. We've done 8 other things. They've failed. Oh, another failure. Let's try something different. And Satyak was like, no, we didn't do anything wrong. He's like, Sunny, we just started 5 days ago. We're even like collecting the KYC documents of our customers. We haven't defrauded anyone. We just opened our doors. If they have questions, we'll answer them, but we're not going to shut shop. And he said that we're not going to shut shop because he's like, if I give up today, there's a good chance that my country will lose out. All of India will lose out on this revolution. And now when I hear stories of the Beeples and not the Beeple, but Metacoven buying the $69 million South Indian guy who lives in Singapore now buying this, and like how many other stories like that are there in India of people that made a lot of money that changed their lives because guys like stood up and said, no, we're not gonna stand down. We're gonna keep fighting because we're not doing anything wrong. One of the reasons I wanted to do this kind of interview thing, whatever we're doing right now, is to try and capture these stories of courage, because I think that's the piece that I think gets missed. You know what I mean? There's enough videos about all-time high. There's enough video about charting and the math behind Bitcoin, but I think the piece that gets missed is like that Bitcoin is really a story of like courage of all these people, not just Satvik. Forget the two of us, but your father, for example. I think the next part of the story where he comes in is very fascinating, right? So what happened? So we're staring into the abyss. I think Elon Musk has a famous quote. What is it? Starting a business is like chewing glass and staring into the abyss. And that's kind of what it felt like. It was like, what the heck do we do? And I think we had two options, right? One was we write some long document, send it to the government and wait years and whatever. But then there was an option number two. What was that option that we ended up taking?
Well, I think we decided that we would all take the bull by its horn rather than going into the whole legalese back and forth and writing and asking the government to set up a special committee and everything. We said, let's take the bull by its horn. And at that point, we decided to have a press conference, where we had people from Unocoin and other crypto players at that time come into our office. And the first half of the press conference was just explaining what Bitcoin is to the press. And at the end of the conference, for the grand finale, we had briefed my father about different regulations in India, including the Coinage Act, the Money, all the Constitution of India, and a couple other acts. And he had been briefed, and he was convinced that Bitcoin per se is not illegal in India. And he goes up there in front of the press, which included everyone from CNBC to Z News to Bloomberg and all the Economic Times and all of them. And he made this statement. And that became headline news the next day in all the major publications in India. And the next thing we know is that the exchanges are up and running because someone had taken a position and someone had actually stood up, and it was quite a brave move. And if I talk more about it, it's more like self-flattery and stuff like that. But I think it was a pivotal moment that changed how Bitcoins and crypto would evolve in this country. It was a historical moment, like that a leading lawyer he put his entire life's reputation and everything on the line, and everything that he had gained, he put it on the line for Bitcoins and crypto. And he could have easily said that, like, we don't want to deal with this, we don't want to make any noise. We could have taken that route and that could have gone on, but that would have stalled the exchanges at that time. And so I feel that it was quite a ballsy move to do this. And keep in mind, at that time, Bitcoin was mostly associated with the dark web and drugs and illicit gun trade and things like that. And for him to take this position, I gave him a lot of props for it. And that's how this whole, I see being one of the key moments in the Indian crypto world. And soon after that, things were running pretty well. And after the statement, we were called in by the enforcement directorate themselves to give them a briefing on Bitcoins and what it is, and explaining to them the technology and why it's a positive thing. And so we went and we presented it, and we had several calls with the RBIs, and people from RBI started calling us up and asking us for some kind of, and remember, we are a law firm. We are not a computer science or an internet company who can explain the technical side of the game as well as the other people can. But whatever we could, we did. And that in turn allowed the crypto exchanges to come back into action.
Yeah. I know you were saying it's hard to toot your own horn and talk about your own father and your own firm, but as a person who's not you, I can definitely attest to that statement. And I've been in meetings and worked alongside your father, and really a beacon of hope. Really changed. He's an individual that's changed my perspective of humanity and given me hope, really, that there are freedom fighters out there. And I think, and that India has a much brighter future than I grew up imagining it may have. It's seeing people like Satvik who are willing to risk it all, and Harish, and anyways, the other freedom lovers is really inspiring. And you said balls. When people ask me to describe that story about Satvik, my final words are balls of steel. like that's literally what he probably needed at the time to make these kind of decisions. But again, it's not just a story of a hero, right? It's like almost a story of like heroes and heroines, of like people, like a community of people being attracted to this. And if Satoshi even probably wasn't, if he was a person, I'm pretty sure most people probably wouldn't even care. It was like, because Bitcoin became this like mind virus, like this internet-like thing of money very early on, and captured the imagination of smart people, thank God. What happened next? I know for Unocoin's perspective, one of the big landmarks was Barry Silbert investing, right? So that was the first foreign investor. Recently, Nandan Nilekani and like Balaji, they've been talking about how the crypto economy can potentially unlock these 60 million small and medium-sized businesses in India to raise capital to build the next $1 trillion industry in India. Unocoin was really the first example of that, right? Like we were the first, I guess you could say, company where crypto people like Barry Silbert, the Drapers, et cetera, started investing in, so that we could have these stories to tell, so that we could survive and build a company. And so I thought that was interesting, and also another story of courage, because this is a little bit just paraphrasing, but when these guys had seen, I think, Barry's email, even, they didn't take it seriously, because they were like, who would give us money for like a fun project that we're working on? We're just doing this for us. And it was a bit of a shock. And so Barry was very persistent, and he was like, guys, like, I'm the investor of Coinbase. I invested in all these other companies. Like, please respond. But I think Barry coming in and investing was like a real, at least for me, because I had left and I was working for Buttercoin, even though I was a part of the founding team of Unocoin, I never really believed that team that I met through some meetups and a couple of guys, a Hard Rock Cafe, that they would actually build something that we would actually not only have traction, not only be able to fight through this roadblock that we just talked about, but then also to raise money from what I consider to be the Batman of Bitcoin, like Barry effing Silbert. and that was crazy. And in those days, who were the big players? There was, I think, a year after we launched, ZebPay came into the scene with their offering. There was another company called, so Benson and these guys had started a company called CoinSecure. There was, I think, just maybe one or two others. I'm trying to remember. BitX. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So it was really just a handful of companies that had almost been that, right? For a long time. For like many years, it was just 3-4 companies just duking it out. And when would you say things heated up again in a big way? And it's important to note that notice on the RBI website did resurface a few times throughout the year. So whenever things would boil up in the news, you would see that kind of show up in the RBI website, and it would be a paraphrase of what was shown in 2013. There was not too much of a change, right?
2014, 2015 were pretty easy.
Meh.
There's nothing significant that was happening. And then, boom, 2000, post, I think 2016, was it? Or 2015? We had the Gain Bitcoin story that came out about the Ponzi scheme, and things like that happened. And then that I think the news broke out in 2016 types. And then there was demonetization in November of 2016 on 9th.
So a lot of people ask me about that around the world. Like, they almost can't believe that's a thing. But do you mind maybe touching on just quickly what that was? Like, what happened?
Yeah,
like, you woke up one morning and what?
So overnight, it was decided by the government to demonetize the 500 and 1,000 rupee currency bills in India, which meant, and India, remember, is a cash economy. So it's basically telling the people of India, that the people of America, that your $20 bill and your $100 bill are no longer valid.
Just has that happened in India before? Or is that like a normal thing?
That was one of the first instances of something like that happening. And when that happened, a lot of people have cash money in India. India is practically a cash economy, and they were given a certain window to go and deposit that cash, and basically they wanted to, I don't know what the reasons were, but there's a lot of speculation on the reasons. But one of the reasons was that they wanted to flush out the black money from the economy, which obviously hasn't really worked. And at that point, people were like, I would get calls from people, random people who had somehow found my phone number, and they would ask me if I could help them convert the cash money into bitcoins. I was like, to deal with cash, I get scared. And these guys are talking about huge numbers. They're going in millions of dollars worth of Indian rupees. And I would tell them that I'm sorry, I can't help you. And at the same time, I was watching the Bitcoin prices in India, and at that point, apparently Bitcoin was selling at a premium of almost 25 to 30%. And there was so much demand coming for it from India. And that was what led to the next notice, which came in 2017, I believe. There was a notice in 2017, and that led us, but that was nothing major. But then the Ponzi scheme the Gain Bitcoin story had really become big, and it had come into the mainstream media. And in fact, there are articles about some Bollywood celebrities being involved in it and things like that. So it became pretty big, and Bitcoin was only associated with stuff like that, dark web and Ponzi schemes. And then 2017, there was this uncertainty, what will happen. And some banks were refusing for the crypto exchanges to function adequately because they were not allowing them to open accounts and things like that. But then in 2018, there was a notice from the RBI which actually mandated that the banks would not be allowed to deal with the exchanges, which pretty much meant that the exchanges would have to shut shop because they have no access to banking system. And that's when we filed a writ petition in May of 2018, and on behalf of the Crypto Association under the banner of IMAI, Internet and Mobile Association of India. And the verdict came out almost 2 years later in 2020, literally 2 weeks or a week or two before the lockdown began on March 4th, that what the RBI had mandated was a bit excessive, and they reversed that ban, and that again got the crypto exchanges back into business. So this is like a second moment where our firm had played a significant, if not pivotal, a pretty significant role in helping the industry. And since then, the COVID happened, and since then there's been a bull run, and now again there are these speculative talks about India wanting to ban Bitcoin, but it doesn't sound very likely, because even if they were to ban it, there would be a petition to challenge it, because it would go against the order of the Supreme Court. So obviously there would be another petition that would be filed, and that's where we are right now.
Yeah, so that story you just shared, that's a big one too, right? In the sense that, like, monumental, right? Monumental. So we just told this story. If you just rewind back like a few minutes, we're about the demonetization thing. Think of how much power the RBI has over like the people that live in India, right? Like, to the point where even if let's say your great grandma left you a bunch of cash in like some pile or whatever, is that now, I don't know, what is that now? Is that not cash anymore? Or let's say you were away for a vacation for 3 months and you come back now, that's my point is, they literally told people that the very thing that you work night and day for, that your family's trying to say, that it's delete, like error, replace. Insane. Like insane. That's insane. That's crazy. That's so much power. Now, these people say to this tiny dinky industry at the time that's littered with scams everywhere, right? Like you said, game Bitcoin, OneCoin, this, that, all these weird things going on. And they go, no, we're not gonna allow this industry to have banking. Most industries at that point would just keel over and die, right? That would be the point where you go, okay, like one of the most powerful entities that looks over one of the most populous countries in the world is saying, the people who literally print the money are saying to a group of people with limited resources and funds, with like in the midst of all this fog, say that no, we're not going to let it happen. So if you ask me, I would say that the odds were stacked up against us. In fact, I think we'd even done some sort of information, what is it called? Like right to information, freedom of information, or something like that, where we ended up getting some insight saying that the central bank was essentially trying to squash the industry into, oblivion. And what does the industry do? They say, we're not doing anything wrong. Even in the absence of rules and regulations by the government, we're mitigating risk at every corner because we're working with firms like yourselves, trying to figure out how we mitigate fraud, how we work with all the security agencies and the police. We work with them. If something bad or something we don't say, hey, no, we're Bitcoiners. We try and do everything we can to follow the rules. And the industry said, no, we're going to challenge this in essentially the Supreme Court. And
the industry came, the fact that even though each exchange is competing with each other, they still came together to take an institution, a mammoth of an institution like the central bank of the country. I don't think there has been any such instance anywhere in the world, especially in the crypto space, where the crypto exchanges have come together and challenged the central bank in the court of law, which really tells you that there is this, I don't want to call it brotherly love because that'd be too gender specific, but there's some kind of camaraderie and there's some kind of unspoken bond between these exchanges, that they're in the same storm. They may have different boats and some may have yachts, but they're in the same storm, and they have to ride it through. And I give props to each and every single one of them for being there for the Indian customer, who, end of the day, it would be the Indian customer that would be at the greatest loss had the exchanges just said, okay, we'll just follow your orders and we just shut our shops. Indians would have lost access to
the best performing asset in the history of mankind.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry. Continue, Suril.
Yeah, and
huge.
And I think it's a huge thing.
Can we pause 1 second though? Can we call out this obvious dichotomy where I agree, okay? I love the story that Unocoin and the Indian pioneers and have taken on the central bank, the David versus Goliath, and won the court case back. But all the while, there's another story playing out on the other side of the world, in the United States, a tiny little company called Coinbase that has similar investors, believe it or not, that has a similar product profile, that has a similar number, roughly at the time, user base. But they're on this trajectory towards becoming $100 billion mammoth. And then you've got this industry in India that's just struggling to stay alive. Does that say anything about the status of the world and how maybe, I don't know, whether it's like lawmakers or regulators should not maybe have as much of a knee-jerk reaction towards these industries? Because like I said, today, yeah, we're telling this beautiful story of how customers had access, but how beautiful would it be if there was three unicorns in India that hired 100,000 people or something like across 20 cities and paid taxes and were law-abiding citizens, and like that could be an Indian, that could have been an Indian story that didn't happen. But I don't know, any thoughts on that line? To me, I go to bed thinking about that sometimes. I try not to beat myself up too much, but it is a little sad, no?
I think sometimes things happen and you just got to be cognizant that, like, unlike the United States, India is not a fully, the capital flows in India still, it's not that easy, to bring in and bring out capital out of India. It's easing up. It has eased up a lot since I was a child, and even more since when my dad was a child. Like in his times when they were little, they would get if they wanted to travel, they would get if you wanted to travel abroad, you would only get $8 worth of foreign exchange. So India has come a long way since then. Now the capital restrictions are easing up to a large degree, and India is going through this phase of, because if you open the Indian Constitution, India, it says that India is a socialist country too. At the same time, it's clearly stated in the Constitution. It was added during the 1970s or something by Indira Gandhi, because that time was more aligned towards Soviet Union and stuff. So you have that India is at a crossroads between socialism and capitalism. While there's that interplay happening between hardcore socialism and capitalism, and it's being played out. It has always been played out in India for the longest time. And also remember that India liberalized its economy in the early part of 90s. And just when it liberalized, that's when the Asian crisis hit. That's when the big stock market crash of Japan happened. And then you had the collapse of Soviet Union. And in that phase, India is opening up. So the regulators and the government in India they get scared of free markets, and at the same time they get scared of hardcore socialism too now. So India is at a very interesting crossroad, and because of that, the government tries to play defensive, and sometimes it becomes too defensive in some sectors and too liberal in other sectors. And because of that, it becomes difficult environment to operate in. So, I'm not defending what has happened or anything. I'm just saying, just putting in perspective.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
That India, you can't expect, like everyone's talking about unicorns, and you got to remember that in India, there are only about 3 crore people. I don't know how much is 1 crore in millions or billions, but about 30, whatever. There's pretty much only 3% of the population is paying income tax. Can you imagine? And the rest of the country is not in a position to pay taxes. So it's only 3%, the top 3 percentile, that's pretty much taking care of the country. And there's this, so we can't be hardcore capital, even though India, some Indians are like more capitalist than any other part of the world. If you go Hinduism, it's nothing but opulence and extravagance, right? Like all the Hindu gods are adorned with gold and trinkets and stuff like that. While at the same time, there is this socialism. And so because of that, it becomes a challenging environment. But then if you can have a successful business here, there is the potential of growing it in other parts of the world as well. And in fact, if India does it right with cryptocurrency, I don't think there would be too much need for regulation. If India gets it right, the more can be exported to parts of the world, underdeveloped parts of the world like Africa and South America as well, the Indian crypto model. That's what I feel. I'm pretty optimistic about the future of crypto in India, especially now that Coinbase has gone public and it has even decided that they're going to have their back-end offices in India. And they chose India for a reason, not just because it's a haven for programmers and technical people, but also it's a big market opportunity for them. And it gives them the fact that they'll be employing at least a good, say, a 50 to 100 people to begin with. That would put them in a better position to coordinate conversations with the government and explain to them why India needs crypto.
Totally agree. Thank you for that insight. That was refreshing. The internet also, you probably know better than me, but the internet, from what I heard, also took time to get to India, meaning it wasn't that as soon as it started taking off, India, from what I hear, was about 10 years late to the party. Could this be a case of that where, yeah, there's this other famous saying, at least in this part of the world, where they call it Indian Standard Time. Like if you invite an Indian person to a party, they're going to show up late. Like it's just called India Standard Time. So I don't know if it's like a cultural thing of a bit of a wait and watch and see it form and then pounce when the opportunity is clear. I don't know what it is exactly, but do you think there's something there? And like I said, I've always felt that Bitcoin was almost made for India, like the gold narrative, the remittance narrative, the youth, the tech, the this, the that, and it just goes on and on. But yeah, do you think that the next 10 years will be very bright for India, or do you think it's question marks?
It's bright with question marks.
So I think the way to maybe reduce the number of questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Now I'm seeing exchanges like CoinSwitch advertise during cricket matches. And cricket matches are cricket is the biggest sport in India. And during the IPL, which is the 2020 version of the cricket, we are seeing every couple of minutes, you're seeing an ad. It's easy to buy a Bitcoin now. And you're seeing this on mainstream television.
Amazing. That just makes me feel so good.
And when you see that, if this is happening, that means that the government is seeing these advertisements, and they are permitting it. They are allowing broadcasters to advertise Bitcoin exchanges
while simultaneously entertaining a bill in the parliament to potentially ban it. Like what? But now that's not happening, of course, but still I'm just saying, like a month ago or something. It's like what?
Now you'll have suddenly, because all these people will watch the cricket watching audience of the country and is going to start trying to, at least if they may not buy a Bitcoin or if they may not trade in it or anything, they'll at least say, let me go and open an account. Let me just open an account and let me see what to do with it. And that changes the game, right? Because suddenly you will have a lot of these accounts. Many of them may not even transact one unit or one anything. They may just be empty accounts, but they can say that I have a crypto wallet. And that changes the whole game, especially when you have I was quite fascinated to see this bold move by an exchange to advertise on television in India.
That's a boss move. That's a perfect timing to do it. And this is what I love about Bitcoin, is that it's not all on you. Like
exactly,
there's some guy smarter, richer, whatever in some corner, and he's coming up with some crazy next level idea. And you just embrace all of it because you're in the Bitcoin boat. I love it. And those guys are smart. Like they're also backed by, I think, Sequoia, and they're some of the smartest guys I've ever come across. So good on them. WazirX, which is, I think, owned by Binance. They're making serious moves within India. We talked about Coinbase killing it now and IPO and now making moves in India, which I'm super excited about. And now you've got Sequoia back, like the backers of Apple and Google and advertising in the cricket matches. But none of this would be possible though if the courage of a few individuals wasn't existent. And I guess when I ask about the future, is it bright, is it question marks, the kind of where I'm trying to lead this to is that you're right, is that we don't know, and it's really a matter of what you do and what people watching this do, right? What like individuals do, and you're seeing like companies and individuals and people and everyone's standing up. And standing up is important, right? Because we obviously want less maybe socialism and communism in this world, and more freedom and more ability to just interact with who you want and build your own business, and not do it with hopefully 50 people at your front door telling you that you shouldn't do it, and warning people all the time. So I think we're turning a corner, but who knows? It'll be a function of what people do. We talked about the big court case last year, which I think was monumental, and we're going to be making some documentaries. We're going to be interviewing more people to shine more light on what happened, mainly because it's important, and we don't want to. I think the COVID thing overshadowed it, and I think a lot of the Bitcoin bull run stuff is going to overshadow it, but we're going to get the story out, and I'm sure a lot of people care. But then, like, we just to close it all up, fast forwarding to more recently, like we've alluded to, there was this bill, if you will, not by just the central bank, now by the government, that was being presented to try and ban Bitcoin. From what we know, that bill did not see the light of day in the parliament and may come back at some point in time. But for the time being, that threat is maybe not there. But in this vacuum, it's not just enough to say, oh, it's just okay. There needs to be things that all people can do and companies can do, whether it's like raising awareness, like companies like CoinSwitch are doing, whether it's legal front, academic, communication, building businesses, just whatever your piece of the pie people can do. But any thoughts on what maybe more people can do out there, Suril, to make a difference? Because a lot of people ask me about this. Oh, is it going to get banned? Is it not? I'm like, I don't know. What are you doing?
If every Indian or every person in India, I can talk about India right now.
Yeah.
But if every Indian would have a crypto wallet, a complementary crypto wallet, which is created by some company or group of companies coming together and creating this India wallet, which is allowed to have any kind of crypto at any given point. While you have the exchanges, which would be buying and selling and trading, but a common wallet, which is issued like you get your Aadhaar card and you get a crypto wallet with it. And that, even if you put like a minuscule amount of Satoshis or Ys or whatever, or a combination, and we create, even if we can just create like a white paper on this, that it itself would, and present it to the government and say that, look, we can right now, you have it's, so instead of the government going and saying that we are going to issue a central bank backed digital currency, we say that, look, you're anyways going to be taxing us, you're going to be charging tax on if you're profiting and whatever, but then might as well create a wallet through which we can pay our taxes. And this wallet is provided free of cost. Any which ways, all the wallets are free of cost. Whether I open a wallet with Unocoin or WazirX or CoinDCX or CoinSwitch, to open a wallet is free.
Yeah.
Right. And right now, or if all the exchanges come together and say that we have this one India wallet, which is created not just for the smartphone, but even for the old Nokia phones, which most people in India use till date. And for any exchange to go and that level of tech would require a lot of investment. But I feel India is one place where it's to deploy a wallet with, it could be seen like politically and how it would play out, because if the government were to do it, it would be looked upon as the government just doling out shitload of money to billions of people. But in the long run, if everyone had a wallet, just a wallet, that's all that's needed. And we can think about that, or making it easy for someone to open a wallet on Unocoin.
And so I think so maybe so we're inching to the end of our hour and a half here, but I think you're touching on a very like big point, which maybe we could do our next talk on. So we summed up our story, but we want to take these experiences and now continue serving, right, in the best way possible. Hopefully not inside of courts, outside of courts, and where we're just serving people, like whether. And so we do have some projects, obviously, that we're talking about, thinking about, and maybe we can just brainstorm more. Maybe bring in some of these other players, right? The coin switch guys, the whatever. We bring in some of these players and throw around ideas of how we do maybe, yeah, like you said, or maybe an Indian rupee wallet on the Bitcoin blockchain. That could be done. And it could be decentralized, or maybe the RBI holds one of many nodes or something. They can become miners. No, I'm kidding. Okay, we'll have to think through this problem set. But dude, I think this has been fantastic. I definitely had more than a few moments where I was like, yeah. I think we're touching on some of the stuff that we need to be touching on. Anything you want to share in closing, Real? This has been a lot of fun, man.
Just hold on, man. Everyone should just hold right now and enjoy the journey and ride the waves, and wish you a beautiful Bitcoin future.
Lovely. Okay, so on that note, let's bring this one to a close, and I will do so here.